In old age, as in every phase of life, a person is confronted with a quiet but unavoidable question. What remains of you when the outer supports begin to fade? How does one preserve self-awareness when the world no longer organizes itself around your presence? This question does not appear out of nowhere. It arrives when time reveals its unstoppable force, and slowly what once felt permanent is exposed as transient. Yet it is precisely here, after 65, and especially between 65 and 80, that the true measure of a life becomes visible. Not in achievements, not in noise, but in the inner foundations that keep a person upright when the external world can no longer promise stability, because old age dissolves dependence. It does not erase all connections, but it reveals which ones are real and which were only habits, roles, or illusions. Jung said the second half of life is when we stop living for the world's approval and start living for the soul. So these 5 things aren't just nice to have, they're signs you're still connected to what's real. And each one points to something deeper, the quiet strength of a person who can rely on what remains within. Count them as we go. By the end, you will know exactly where you stand. Thing number 1. A place where your nervous system can rest. In old age, a home is not merely a property. It is a psychological boundary. It is the one physical space where the outer world stops pressing in, where the body is allowed to unclench, where the mind can return to itself without interruption. When people speak about housing after 65, they often speak in numbers: rent, mortgage, value, market. But what truly matters is quieter than that. The question is simple. Do you have a place that lets you breathe? Because after a certain age, peace is not a luxury. It is maintenance. Without it, the nervous system begins to live in constant alertness, and a person slowly loses the ability to feel safe even in their own skin. Let me tell you about Evelyn. She is 71 and lives in Phoenix. For most of her life, she rented. Every few years she moved, always adapting to someone else's walls, someone else's rules, someone else's sudden decisions. She told me there was a kind of invisible tension in that life, never quite settling, always aware that her stability depended on an outside authority. Then at 68, she bought a small condo, not big, not impressive, but it was hers, and she said something that sounds ordinary until you really hear it. I don't have to ask permission to hang a picture. What she was describing was not decoration. It was dignity. It was the end of asking the world for the right to exist comfortably. After 65, stability begins to carry a different meaning. Options shrink faster than we want to admit. Moving becomes harder on the body. New environments are harder on the mind. And the outer world is not always gentle with seniors. Landlords change policies, neighborhoods shift. People start treating you as if you are temporary. And that is exactly why a stable home becomes a form of inner freedom. It is a door you can close, a bed that belongs to your body, a roof that does not disappear because someone else changed their mind. This is not about owning a mansion. It does not require perfection. It can be a small apartment, a modest house, even a single room that is truly yours. What matters is that your nervous system recognizes it as safe. When you wake up there, you are not bracing. When you sit down, you are not listening for someone else's mood. You are simply present. In the second half of life, the soul begins to resist constant performance. Jung wrote about the persona, the social mask we wear to remain acceptable. Many people spend decades living through that mask, shaping their lives around what others expect. But old age has a strange gift. It weakens the power of appearances. The world becomes quieter, and the inner life becomes louder. A home, then, is not only a shelter. It is the place where the persona can finally rest and the self, the real you, can return. That is why a home is not only about comfort, it is about regulation. When the environment is stable, the mind becomes stable. When the space is yours, the body stops negotiating for permission. You begin to sleep differently, think differently, even speak differently. So I want to ask you gently but directly, do you have a place where you can exhale? A place where you are not on guard? A place that belongs to you in the most important way, not legally but psychologically? If you do, protect it, simplify it, make it kinder to your nervous system. Because at this age, a peaceful home is not small. It is one of the greatest forms of wealth. And if you don't have it yet, do not despair. The goal is not luxury. The goal is stability. Even small steps, decluttering one corner, creating a routine, establishing a sense of order, can begin to build that inner sanctuary. Because in old age, the most valuable place you can own is the one that gives you back to yourself. Thing number 2, a body that still gives you options. In old age, the body becomes a kind of quiet judge, not cruel, not sentimental, simply honest. It tells you what is possible today, and it tells you what is no longer possible without consequence. And that honesty can be painful if you resist it, but it can also be deeply clarifying. Because after 65, freedom is no longer an abstract idea. Freedom becomes practical. It becomes the ability to move through your own life without fear. People talk about health as if it's about looking young. That is not the real question. The real question is, does your body still give you choices? Can you stand without bracing? Can you walk to the mailbox, climb a few steps, carry a bag of groceries, get up from a chair without negotiating with pain? These are not small things. They are the difference between living your life and merely being managed inside it. Let me tell you about Harold. He is 68 and lives in Seattle. 3 years ago, he slipped on ice and broke his hip. He went to rehab. He did the exercises. He tried to return to himself. But something changed that he didn't expect. It wasn't only the injury, it was the fear that followed it. He told me, "I used to walk 3 miles a day, now I need a walker just to get to the bathroom. I didn't know how much my legs meant until they were gone." When people lose mobility, they don't just lose movement, they lose dignity in quiet ways. They start planning life around what can be avoided. They stop going places because the effort is too high or the fear of falling is too real. Their world shrinks, not because they want it to, but because the body is no longer cooperating. And once the world shrinks, the mind often follows. This is why your legs are not just limbs, they are your autonomy. If your legs still carry you, you can visit a friend, walk in your own home, stand at the stove and cook. You can change your environment when your mood becomes heavy. You can leave a conversation that drains you. You can still act on your own will. Kant spoke of autonomy as living by an inner law rather than being controlled by external forces. In old age, the body becomes one of those forces. And so maintaining strength is not vanity, it is a form of moral independence. It is the ability to continue living as a person with agency. Now let me be clear, this is not about perfection. Pain exists, knees ache, backs stiffen, energy fluctuates. None of that means you have failed. The question is not whether the body is flawless. The question is whether you are still using what you have while you still have it. There is a woman named Margaret in Portland. She is 74. She walks every morning, not far, just around her block. 20 minutes. She said, "My knees hurt, my back's not perfect, but as long as I can move, I will." That's not obsession, that is wisdom, because the body listens to what you practice. If you practice sitting, you become a person who sits. If you practice moving, you remain a person who moves. And here is what many people don't want to hear. After 65, muscle loss accelerates. Weakness, if you ignore it, becomes stubborn. Not because you are lazy, but because the body adapts quickly to what it is not asked to do. This is why small, consistent movement matters more than any dramatic effort. So if your body still gives you options, treat it like something sacred, not because you fear death, but because you respect life. Stretch in a way that feels gentle, strengthen in a way that feels sustainable. Do not wait until you are forced, because one day, without warning, the simplest actions can become negotiations. And that is why the ability to move is not just health, it is freedom. Thing number 3, one real person, not a crowd. In youth, people often measure social life in numbers. How many friends? How many invitations? How many messages? But old age exposes how fragile that arithmetic is. Because as the years pass, the list grows quieter. People move, people change. Some fall ill, some disappear. And one day you realize that what matters was never the size of the circle, but whether there is at least one human being who truly knows you and still stays. After 65, connection becomes less about entertainment and more about anchoring. A real person is not someone who fills your calendar. A real person is someone who helps you remain a person when the world begins to treat you as an age, a category, a problem to manage. Let me tell you about Patricia in Denver. She is 72. She has one friend she has known for 40 years. Every Thursday they meet for coffee, same cafe, same table. Patricia said, we don't talk about anything important, we just talk. And when she said it, she almost laughed, as if it sounded too simple to matter. But that is exactly why it matters, because when you are older, there is a particular kind of loneliness that does not come from being alone. It comes from feeling unseen, from living in a world where people rush past you, speak over you, reduce you to a stereotype. A single friendship, steady, ordinary, unglamorous, becomes a quiet resistance against that erasure. There is a man named Leonard in Boston. He is 76. His closest friend lives 3 states away. They rarely see each other now. But every Sunday, at the same time, they talk. They have done it for 30 years. Leonard told me, I don't need a lot of friends, I just need him. When a person says that, they are not describing social life. They are describing survival in the best sense, the ability to remain emotionally intact. Modern research talks about loneliness as a health risk, and it is. But you don't need a full contact list to protect yourself from it. You need one real connection. One person who picks up. One person who listens without trying to correct you. In Jungian terms, this is not just companionship, it is a mirror. Jung believed that we become ourselves in relation, not through performance, but through recognition. A real friend is someone in whose presence you do not need a persona. You do not need to be impressive. You can be ordinary. You can be tired. You can be quiet. You can be human. And that is rare, because many people confuse being around others with being connected. They sit at family gatherings and feel isolated. They have neighbors and still feel alone. They scroll through photos of other people's lives and feel like they are watching the world from outside a window. A real friend is not the one who is always available. It is the one who is emotionally real. This is why one person is enough to change your life after 65. One consistent voice in your week can keep your mind from turning inward in the wrong way. One invitation, coffee, a walk, a phone call, can keep your day from becoming an empty space filled only with noise. One friendship can gently remind you that you still matter, not because you are useful, but because you are you. And if you don't have that person right now, I want to say something without sugarcoating it. It can still be built. It won't appear by magic, but it can begin in a small, almost humble way. A conversation with a neighbor, a call to an old acquaintance, a weekly routine that puts you in the same place with the same people. Connection at this age often grows through repetition, not excitement. The question is not whether you can have a crowd. The question is whether you have one real person. If you do, you are richer than you realize. Protect that bond. Feed it with small consistency. Don't wait until you're desperate to reach out. And if you don't, let this be the moment you decide to start. Because in old age, one real person is not a luxury. It is one of the foundations of a life that still feels worth living. Thing number 4, a relationship that isn't built on guilt. In old age, many illusions collapse on their own. Not because you become cynical, but because time removes the extra layers. You start seeing what was real, what was habit, and what was held together only by obligation. And nowhere is this more painful or more clarifying than in family relationships. A lot of people think good family ties are proven by sacrifice, by how much you gave, by how much you controlled yourself to keep the peace. But after 65, the measure becomes simpler and also harder. Do the people closest to you still choose you when they don't have to? Not because they need money, not because it's a holiday, not because guilt pushes them, because they want to hear your voice, because your presence still feels like home. Let me tell you about Gloria in Atlanta. She's 69, she has 3 children. 2 call her every week, 1 calls every day. She said, "Yeah, I don't need gifts, I don't need visits all the time, I just need to know they still think about me." And when she said that, there was something in her face that looked like peace. Not pride, peace. Because being wanted is different from being owed. This is what many parents don't realize until later. Guilt can keep a relationship alive, but it cannot keep it warm. Guilt creates contact, but it creates a certain kind of contact. Tight, resentful, performative. The phone call becomes a duty. The visit becomes a negotiation. The love becomes a transaction. I did this for you, so you should do this for me. That may keep people in the same room, but it does not create closeness. It creates tension with polite manners. And old age has a way of exposing that tension, because when energy becomes limited, you can no longer afford relationships that require constant emotional debt. In old age, autonomy becomes relational too. A healthy bond is one where love is chosen freely, not extracted through fear, obligation, or shame. If your relationships have this quality, they are not built on guilt. They are built on respect. And that respect often begins with how you treated your children when they became adults. Some parents cannot let go of authority. They keep trying to steer, correct, criticize, and control. They use guilt as a tool because it feels safer than vulnerability. If they feel afraid of being left behind, they tighten the leash. They remind their children of everything they sacrificed. They speak as if love must be repaid. But love that demands repayment is not love, it is a contract. A mature parent does something rarer. They accept the truth that their children are not extensions of them. They are separate lives. They learn how to stay present without dominating, to stay connected without ownership. They become someone their adult children can return to without bracing themselves. When that happens, the calls feel different. The voice on the other end isn't tense, it's relaxed. The child isn't performing duty, they're sharing life, they're inviting you into their world. Now I want to speak gently to those of you who don't have this, because many people don't. Some families carry old wounds. Some children are distant for reasons that are complicated. Sometimes it was mistakes on both sides. Sometimes life simply scattered everyone and nobody knew how to bridge the silence again. But here is the one thing that is still possible at almost any age: a shift from control to truth. A simple message can open a door that guilt keeps locked. I miss you. I'm thinking about you. I don't want to fight. I just want to know how you are. No lecture, no accounting, no emotional debt, just a clean signal of presence. And if the relationship cannot be repaired, this too becomes part of old age wisdom. You release what cannot be forced. You stop poisoning yourself with the need to be chosen. You grieve what you didn't have and you protect what you still do. Because in old age, relationships that survive are not the ones built on fear. They are the ones built on freedom. If someone calls you because they want you, not because they owe you, you are doing life right. Thing number 5, inner peace that isn't dependent on anyone. In old age, the world becomes quieter, but the mind can become louder. The body slows down, schedules thin out, the house falls silent, and suddenly you hear what you've been carrying for decades. Old arguments replay themselves like unfinished music. Faces from the past return at night. Words you never said line up in your head as if you are still preparing for a conversation that will never happen. This is why inner peace is not a soft concept after 65. It is not a spiritual accessory. It is a form of survival, because if you cannot rest inside your own mind, you will spend the final chapter of your life in a prison that has no walls. Many people think peace depends on circumstances, having the right partner, the right family, the right amount of money, the right apologies. But old age teaches a harsher truth. External life is transient. People change, people disappear. The world does not guarantee closure. If your peace requires someone else to behave differently, then you have handed your freedom to a world that will not protect it. True freedom, Kant wrote, is not obedience to the world, but obedience to a law you give yourself. In old age, autonomy becomes emotional. It means being guided by a quiet inner principle instead of being dragged around by resentment, regret, or bitterness. Inner peace is the evidence that a person has stopped being ruled by the past. Let me tell you about Martin. He is 72 and lives in Chicago. For 20 years he carried hatred toward his brother. The fight began over their father's will, money, property, pride, things that felt enormous at the time. They stopped speaking. Holidays became awkward, family gatherings grew tense, but the real damage happened in private. Martin told me that at night he would lie awake replaying the argument, imagining what he should have said, rehearsing a victory that never arrived. His wife finally told him, "You're angrier at your brother than he is at you. He moved on, you're still stuck." Martin didn't want to hear it, but it was true. Then he went to the doctor for high blood pressure. The doctor asked, "What's eating at you?" Martin talked about his brother, and the doctor said something that changed him. "You're the only one paying the price for this anger." That night, Martin called his brother. Not to apologize, not to reopen the case, just to speak. They didn't fix everything, but the resentment began to loosen. Over months, it faded, not because the past became right, but because Martin got tired of being poisoned by it. This is the difficult lesson. Resentment is not justice. It is attachment. It keeps you tied to the very person you claim you want to escape. It gives them a permanent room in your mind, and after 65, that room becomes expensive. It costs sleep, it costs health, it costs the ability to enjoy the few years that are still truly yours. There is a form of freedom that comes when you finally see resentment for what it is, an attempt to stay in control of what already happened. It is the mind trying to rewrite history so you don't have to feel grief. But grief must be felt. Old age does not give you the luxury of endless avoidance. Jung believed that what we refuse to face in ourselves does not disappear. It returns in other forms. Often, it returns as rumination, bitterness, inner unrest. Peace comes not from pretending nothing hurt you, but from integrating what happened into your life story. without letting it rule your present. Letting go does not mean inviting toxic people back. It does not mean saying what happened was acceptable. It means removing the grip they have on your inner world. Sometimes it happens through forgiveness. Sometimes it happens through acceptance. Sometimes it happens by simply deciding, I am done paying for this. So here is the question I want to leave with you. And it is not meant to hurt you. It is meant to free you. Whose name still tightens your chest? Who are you still arguing with in your mind at night? Who still lives in your thoughts without paying rent? You do not need an apology to release them. You do not need them to understand. You do not need closure from the outside. You need a decision inside, because if you can go to bed at night without replaying old battles, without wishing harm on anyone, without carrying poison into your sleep, then you have achieved something rare. You have chosen peace over being right. And at this age, that choice is not weakness. It is the deepest form of strength. Now let's take a quiet inventory. Between 65 and 80, life becomes less about collecting and more about keeping what is essential. So ask yourself, how many of these 5 do you still have? A place where your nervous system can rest. A body that still gives you options. One real person who truly knows you. A relationship that isn't built on guilt. A mind that can go to sleep without carrying poison. If you have all 5, you are not merely doing well. You are living with a kind of inner stability most people never reach. If you have 3 or 4, you are still ahead of most because you have what matters when the outer world becomes unreliable. And if you only have 1 or 2, don't let that turn into despair. Awareness is not a sentence, it is the beginning of change. This is what the second half of life reveals. Not everyone becomes freer with age. Some become trapped in old patterns. But those who strengthen these foundations gain something rare, an inner autonomy that does not depend on applause, approval, or perfect circumstances.